Hello and welcome back to the Word for Kids. I'm Jaymie and I am so excited to start another adventure with you this year through the books of 1st and 2nd Samuel. These books include the stories of Samuel, of course, as well as King Saul and King David. You may be familiar with some things from the Samuels without even realizing they're found here, like the famous story of David and Goliath. There's so much to learn and discover in these books, so let's get started. There was a man named Elkanah who had 2 wives. Their names were Hannah and Peninnah. Now, only 2 sentences in, I think it's important to pause right there in our story to talk about something. 2 wives? Yes, during Old Testament times, it was common for men to marry more than one woman. There were various reasons for doing this, including the ability to have more children or as part of an agreement or trade with another family or group of people. It seems at the time this was not specifically forbidden as a sin, but as we will see in this story and several others in the Bible, it's clear that living in such a way brought about a lot of problems for the family. In the New Testament, it's more clearly stated that a man should have only one wife, and that's how followers of Jesus live their lives today. If you have questions about this, talk to your parent or a leader at your church. Now, let's get back to the story. Elkanah's wife Peninnah had children, but his other wife Hannah did not have children. Every year he went up to worship and sacrifice to the Lord Almighty at Shiloh. Here the Bible mentions that Eli the high priest had 2 sons, Hophni and Phinehas, who were priests of the Lord there in Shiloh. We'll learn more about them in the next episode. Anyway, the day came for Elkanah to sacrifice, and he gave portions of the meat to Peninnah and her children, but he gave a double portion of meat to Hannah, because he loved her, and she could not have children. Whenever Hannah went to the house of the Lord, Peninnah would provoke her, which means tease her, because she could not have children. Have you ever been teased by someone because there was something you couldn't do? How did that make you feel? Well, Hannah became so upset that she wept or cried out loud and would not eat. Peninnah was so mean to Hannah, the Bible calls her a rival, which is another word for an enemy. Once, in her deep anguish, which means emotional pain or sadness, Hannah prayed to the Lord as she cried out. She made a vow. Let's pause right there for today's word of the day.
Hi kids, my name is Eugene the Turtle. Have you ever read your Bible and come across a word you didn't really understand? Yeah, me too. It happens to me a lot. But that's what I'm here for. As you guys go through the school year and read 1st and 2nd Samuel, I'm going to be here with a word of the day. So today's word is vow, a spoken promise or commitment. Vow.
Now, Hannah was crying out to the Lord when she made this vow. She told the Lord if he would look on her and the pain she was in, remember her and not forget her, and give her a son, she would give him to the Lord all the days of his life, and a razor would never be used on his head. A razor? If you were with us last year in Joshua, Judges, and Ruth, the promise to never use a razor on a boy's head might sound familiar. This was called a Nazirite vow. We learned all about this when an angel appeared to Samson's mom before he was born and told her to raise him as a Nazirite, which, as you know, led to Samson's long hair and the source of his great strength. A Nazirite lived his life in service to the Lord, and here in this story, Hannah was promising God that if he would give her a son, she would dedicate him to God. She was praying in her heart. Her lips were moving, but her voice was silent. Eli the priest was there, and when he saw this, he thought she was drunk and told her to put away her wine. But she assured him she was not drunk, just a woman who was deeply troubled, pouring out her soul to the Lord out of her grief. Eli answered her, "Go in peace, and may the God of Israel grant you what you have asked of him." After this, Hannah ate something, and her face no longer looked sad. Hannah became pregnant and gave birth to her son, whom she named Samuel, which means God has heard. She named him this because she had asked the Lord for him. When Elkanah went up to offer the annual sacrifice to the Lord and to fulfill his vow, Hannah did not go. But she said when the boy had weaned, she would present him before the Lord, and he would live there always. After Samuel was weaned, Hannah did just as she said she would do. She took him to the house of the Lord at Shiloh along with a sacrifice. She went to Eli and said, "I am the woman who stood here beside you praying to the Lord. I prayed for this child, and the Lord has granted me what I asked of him. So now I give him over to the Lord for his whole life." And Samuel ministered before the Lord under Eli the priest. And that's where our story ends for today. Now it's time for our verse to remember. Today's verse is 1 Peter 3:12. "For the eyes of the Lord are on the righteous, and his ears are attentive to their prayer, but the face of the Lord is against those who do evil." One more time. "For the eyes of the Lord are on the righteous, and his ears are attentive to their prayer, but the face of the Lord is against those who do evil." There's a lot we can learn from today's story. One thing I found really encouraging is that God hears our heart, just as he heard Hannah's. She cried out to God in her deepest sadness, and he answered her prayer. As we will find out later, the birth of Samuel set in motion a lot of things for God's people, and he was part of God's bigger plan. This doesn't mean God is like a magic genie granting everything we wish for, but he does care about the desires of our hearts. Just as parents sometimes tell their children yes when they ask for something, they must also sometimes say no, because they can see and understand more than the child can. In the same way, God sometimes answers our prayers with a yes, as he did for Hannah, and sometimes he answers our prayers with a no. Try writing down your prayer request to God, and later go back and write down what the answer was. Over time, you'll have a written book of the ways God has worked in your life. That's all the time we have for today. I can't wait to see you again soon for another episode of The Word for Kids.